I'm Pastor Jeremy Combs, and we're looking at God's good news in Galatians. Well, it's been a long time since this has happened in our Bible studies, but we didn't even make it through a complete verse last time. We made it through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 words. Okay, a little bit over half, but not quite half the verse, because we spent a lot of time setting up the subject of the fruit of the Spirit, not the fruits, but the fruit. So it's not like, well, I've got love in my life, but not a lot of joy, and I've got peace. But no, this is all, these are, you turn the spigot on, and what flows out? Well, what flows out in your life, if the Spirit of God is in you and you're yielding and letting Him lead you, you will have love, you will have joy, you will have peace. And I mentioned that these are all encompassing, but then I think there's a progression there. As you love God, you're going to have greater joy. As you have love and joy, that's going to bring you some peace in your life, that you can rest content in Him and be satisfied with what He's done, and that He loves you and He will provide for you. Now this spills over into the last two categories, which I think we should be able to cover today. And the first lump of the fruit of the Spirit is they're in threes, is really a lot to do with God, us and God. Love, okay, joy, peace. Obviously, we can show love to others. We can have some joy with others. We need to have peace. But I find as we're looking at this, that these fruits are growing: love, joy, and peace. And as those are coming along, there's other fruits that are ripening. Maybe they're not growing as quickly, but they're coming pretty fast. I see almost you could see a markers of maturity here, that, boy, I see a lot of love on there. Let me dig deeper. Yep, there's some more joy in there. And then as you see some more peace in there, you say, wait a minute, I'm going to dig even deeper, pull these branches back. I thought I'd see it, because there's so much love, there's so much joy, there's a lot of peace. Now I see, verse 22, long suffering. Long suffering is two words that are combined that mean long tempered. Okay, a lot of us are short tempered. That is, we can blow up in a moment's notice. Well, for the believer, the fruit of his life is evident when he is long suffering. Now, you say, isn't that kind of like patience? It is, and it's going to be somewhat like gentleness, but long suffering, unlike gentleness, really has a lot more to do when things are not going well. And we really think of adverse situations. Maybe even Paul is thinking about persecution here. Will you be long suffering? Will you have the patience, and will you have the temperament to not blow up and destroy yourself or others around you? You say, that is hard, Pastor. Oh, I know it is. That's why we mentioned, I think this is kind of a progression here. You see the love of God, that's going to help. You find a joy that, if the Christian life is all misery, well, how are you going to have long suffering? Boy, when you are living in joy and then there's a setback, you say, that's okay. It's in God's plan, and in His presence is fullness of joy. This is only gonna be a temporary thing. And so it gives us that patience that we need, that control that we must have when people treat us wrong. I don't know how many believers out there that they cannot stand or tolerate anybody treating them poorly. I remember in Bible college, we used to be told, if you want to be used by God, you got to be used for God. And I've known people that will say, I'm just not going to do that. I'm not going to let people use me. Ooh. It's an evident that their fruit is not as flourishing as it ought to be, because there's a long suffering there, that when bad things happen, they're going to stick to it. And they're not going to blow their stack and curse God and die like Job's wife recommended to him. But instead, we're going to be like Job, who said, the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. He had peace with God. He had joyful moments with God, and he loved God. So when he needed to, Job was long suffering. The second fruit is gentleness. Now, we mentioned before is a lot with circumstances, hard times. Now we come to gentleness. This is our personal acquaintances, dealings with other people. And really, the idea of gentleness really is the idea of kindness. That you are, think of a gentle. I think of horses when I think of gentle. I think of you can get on a horse and man, he just wants to get up and go. And he's, he doesn't hardly want you to put your foot up. Once you get it in the stirrup, he's wanting to take off. He's just kind of herky jerky. And then you get into some horses and they're just very kind in nature. And you swing up on, and man, they don't hardly move. And then they just await your commands there. The dealing there is the horse is broke. And the idea here is, are we broke? And that is under the control of God so much that we would be described as generous, kind, gentle. When someone royally messes up, do we pounce on them and condemn them? Well, remember the big ugly that we talked about last week? There's envyings and there's strife and there's heresies and wraths and emulations. That's what your flesh has to offer. What God offers is, hey, you know what? I'm going to help you. I know that wasn't right. We're going to deal with that. We'll make it right. But I'm going to help. I'm going to encourage you. I'm here for you. There is a gentleness, okay? And you go to deal with your kids. A lot of folks won't deal with their kids because they just are going to blow my stack, and I understand that. Okay, kids can be trying, but that's where we need the empowerment of God, the Spirit, to take over and say, "But I'm going to be gentle. I'm going to be gentle, and I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to ask God for help." And then I'm going to try to understand the situation, but then also tell them what needs to be told because it's the very best thing for them. I think about our bus route. Oh man, sometimes on Wednesday night, them kids are wired, okay, and we love them. And I drive and help pick them up, and I've got my co-pilot right now that rides with me, and my cousin, and she's doing a great job. And one thing you've got to have with them kids is you've got to have gentleness because they get on and they're screaming and they're yelling and they're jumping up and down in the seats. And, the old nature, the flesh wants to sit down in that seat. Would you kids? And would you shut up? Would you stop that? Saying things curt and unkindly rather than, hey guys, let's, and I do have to raise my voice. But I try to the best I can to recognize that, these are kids and they're excited. And I'd much rather them be here hopping up and down and screaming and yelling than not be here at all. And some of the best workers on our route, which, by the way, our co-pilot there is doing a great job. And one thing I could say about her is there's a gentleness there, okay, where kids are acting up. I'm just going to go sit in the back next to them and talk to them to kind of calm them down. That's a Christian spirit, not just a threatening, yelling type of a spirit. And then there's goodness. Boy, I'm going to have to speed up here. This is hard. But hey, we're almost ready to finish a verse today. And this is the idea of moral and spiritual excellence. So again, as we're broadening the fruit, you've got love, you've got joy, you've got peace. Then, boy, you're seeing someone that is long suffering. They're very patient. They're long in their temperament when things are not going well. They're gentle with other people, even when things are not going their way. And then they've got just a goodness about them. There's a purity about them, a moral excellence. There's a spiritual excellence where over everything else, they want what is spiritually best for that person and not just for themselves. Remember, it's the goodness of God that leads us to repentance. And goodness can involve firmness. It's the idea of this is good, you need it. I think about kids and making them eat their vegetables. Well, that's not very, well, it is because it's healthy for them. And so sometimes what you do if you're a good parent is you say, no, you need to learn to eat. And so I'm going to put a spoon on the plate and you're going to eat those today. Okay, and if you don't eat those, you don't get dessert or, you're not going to play video games later or whatever you can do to motivate that person. And oh man, the tears that flow, that whatever. But you do that not out of spite or hatred or vendetta, but you do it out of goodness because you want what is best for that person. Does that describe your life? Everything you work in, do you want it to be morally and spiritually excellent? Boy, it should. You know, is honesty the best policy or the only policy with you? Are you careful with the things you say out of your mouth? Obviously, none of us are perfect in these areas, but there's something that we ought to always be letting the Spirit of God work and say, God, I want to have a better speech. Lord, I want to. We've never arrived. When we start thinking we arrived, we're in big trouble, okay? Because we're not living in the love of God and in the joy and in the peace that He has to offer. And most of these fruits now, before, I mean, it's hard to see someone's love. You can see glimpses of it, their joy, their peace. But these now really show forth that you begin to see a mature believer because, well, they're the long suffering crowd. When things go bad at church, they're still going to stick around. They're going to hang in there. When things happen with other people, they're gentle, they're kind. They're not going to blow up. They're not going to throw stones. They're going to do what they can to try to help. And then they're moral and spiritually excellent, that you don't always have to be wondering what they're up to, or if you give them a position, will they do it right? No, you know it is there. And then you come to the last group. The first group again was God. Second group was with others. And then finally the last group is with yourself. And maybe yourself may be the hardest one to get to. Because I don't know, there's something about that we can really strive for the things of God. We can really strive to do what we can for others. But yet, when it comes to ourselves, I think you see the greatest maturity in your spiritual walk when you have these essences in your life. And that is, he goes on and he says at the end of verse 22, faith. Okay. Obviously, faith is an expanded word for faith. Faithfulness would be the expanded word of that. You're loyal. You're trustworthy. You look to God in every area of your life, and you're not looking away from Him. I mean, you will be counted to be true. Is that you? Okay. Faith is something that you and you alone can build. Faith comes by hearing. I can't make. I can give all of these lessons out, but if you won't listen and you won't apply, they really do you no good. Faith is something you have to do and allow for yourself. Then there is the idea of meekness, which is the beginning of verse number 23. This, as someone has described, as grace of the soul. This is power under control. We think of Moses being the meekest man that ever lived. And by the way, John MacArthur points out these last two are the only two that are never used to characterize God. God's called faithful, He's called good, He's gentle, He's long suffering, He's a God of peace, He's a God of joy, He's a God of love. But you never find God meekness because He doesn't have to be under the control of anything because He is God. And then the other one would be temperance, which would be to be restrained of your appetites and passions. God doesn't have to restrain those because His passions and His appetites are only holy and pure. And so we get to meekness here. It's the idea of uh, can you be right and not have to make it known to everybody? Are you one that is constantly disputing with other people? That's a big problem in Christianity. Something that even I know that I have to be careful of. That you know what you believe in, and yet you seek that you got to try to prove it. And Paul's going to expand on this as he closes out the chapter and gets into the next one. But power under control. I know this is right, and can I share this with you? I don't. Okay, I can respect that. We're not resisting the things of God. When God tells us something, it's not, no, I don't want to. God, what if? God, if I can. No, it's just, God, if you said it, I'm going to do it. You're the master. I'm the servant. Your wish is my command. And then finally, he says this temperance. Now, when we ever think of being temperate, we think of someone that doesn't do alcohol. It's more than just being restrained. It's the idea of actually disciplined restraint. And again, this is the idea of in your appetites and your passions. You're very careful. You say, well, what can I? A legalist will say, well, you can't do this, and you can't do this, and you can't do that. Um, Someone who is spirit filled says, well, I can't do that. It's not. I won't do that. I'm sorry. Not that I can't. I won't. Why won't you? Well, it's because I don't want to. I don't want to go that way. I could spend my time doing something better. I don't know that I want to have my mind and my passions stirred by those things. I'd rather them be stirred and my appetite be focused towards the things of God. And it's where you are temperate in your soul. You're a spiritual being. You're always feeding your soul. So when you watch TV, you're feeding your soul. When you listen to music, you're feeding your soul. When you talk about things and you read a book, you're feeding your soul. Well, not that we can't have things outside of the Bible, but our overall appetite and passion ought to be the things of God. Against such, there is no law. Okay, these are all things that the law can't tell you. You must be meek. You must be. These are things that have to come through the control of another, and that control can only come through God. Hey, we made it. Hey, last time we made it through half a verse. Today we did a verse and a half. Well, we're going to wrap up next week and really get into chapter 6 and wind the book down by looking at our relationship with others. That's where the flesh and the spirit really come into conflict, and we'll look at that next week. Hey, thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.